thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great meeting you finally, because this is how we meet nowadays, right?
Of
So why don't you
course.
tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Sure. So I'm Krista Siniscarco. I am the Vice President of Experience Strategy at Cantina. We are a strategic design and development consultancy out of Boston, a small company, and we build a lot of digital experiences. Not just digital, we also work in service design and have a lot of experience with websites, native mobile apps, anything with a screen. We've also gotten into some really cool emerging technology, IoT, AR, VR, XR, machine learning, AI. So we're experimenting a little bit.
Very cool. And your passion?
My passion are largely around teaching and learning and design thinking. So in addition to my day job at Cantina, I am also adjunct professor in the graduate program of MassArt.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. So what's your definition of design thinking? I would love to hear your definition. There's so many different definitions of design thinking that I just find it really interesting.
Yeah. I talk a lot about design thinking, and I try to kind of skew my definitions a little bit depending on the audience. But the way that I generally think about it is it's a process. And it starts with what is the problem you are trying to solve and who are you solving it for, and takes you through the steps you need to know how to build the right thing and what that right thing is. It's very iterative. It's not linear, even though it's presented in a linear fashion. And it really is a way to help us make sure that we are mitigating risk and not designing anything or solving problems based on assumptions or our own experiences.
Right. Have you ever found that sometimes when you go through design thinking exercises and then you've got the end result, that the end result is nothing like what they actually asked for in the first place?
Oh, very frequently, very frequently. It's very common for us to get like halfway through the process and to say, the problem that you thought you had is not your problem at all.
Right.
And we need to decide right now if we're going to make a pivot or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I understand too that design thinking is a loaded term, and there are a lot of articles out there saying things like, design thinking is bullshit. And I do understand where people are coming from, but I think it's a tool, it's a process, and we could use it the right way or we could use it the wrong way. And a lot of people who have negative experiences with design thinking, and it's not about the process, it's how it was used and how it was used incorrectly.
Right. And that's why I think it's interesting, because when I first heard of it, it had so much mystique around it. Like it was some secret code thing that only a few people knew. And you had to go to the D school and they had to teach it to you there. And I mean, watching those videos on YouTube, it's like, wait a minute, this is, this is not what I thought it was at all. And especially when they were creating these little models and stuff, and I'm going, wow. And then, I mean, I've seen so many different flavors of design thinking. It's just interesting that, you can't really define it like that, right? You can't say this, it depends on what you did with it or how you implemented it.
Yeah, it's at its core, it's a nonlinear thinking process or process of approaching problem solving. I think sometimes too, people get tripped up in the word design as part of design thinking. Either thinking, well, you have to be a designer to participate, or thinking that if you participate, you are a designer.
Right.
And
but I can't draw. I can't contribute.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about that. I think that it's a process that anybody can be a part of.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it really isn't that far away from, I mean, it's like, it isn't really that brand new of a concept, right? I mean, it's basically just almost like, the lean startup stuff is very similar to that too, right? I mean, you bring your customers into the conversation, agile project management, all of that stuff it's not really very different from each other, because you're just bringing your customers into the conversation. You're giving them more say in what's coming out of it, right?
Yeah. I think, Richard Buchanan started writing about design thinking in the early 90s, I want to say. So as a term, it has been around for 30 years or more. As a process, it's been around a lot longer than that. It's been really interesting, I'd say, over the past 10 to 15 years to see it become a little bit more mainstream in the vernacular, at least people being aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're starting to see, especially in my business, clients asking for it by name, which is something very exciting and new.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What are they? So they ask you for design thinking sessions, or like bringing design thinking into what you're doing? Okay.
Yeah, so asking for design thinking workshops,
mm-hmm.
or wanting to hear or see the words design thinking in our proposals and in our decks. It's generally like, oh,
our leadership will only look at it if it has design thinking in it.
Absolutely. It's like, there's a buzzword there that somebody is going to really like. So it's interesting. I'm, one of my other passions is service design, and service design is probably about a decade behind design thinking and kind of really hitting the mainstream, at least in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
In Europe and in I think Latin America, they're kind of leapfrogging us there. So it'll be, I'm hoping, eventually service design will kind of be a little bit more accepted the way design thinking has.
Right. Well, what would you define service design as then in relation to design thinking?
So design thinking is a process that I think can apply to any type of design. If you're mm-hmm. designing a physical thing, a digital thing, an experience. Yep. When I think about service design, where I see it differing from, UX design, user experience, or product design is that's about the thing, right? It's a touch point. It's a website. It's a mobile app. It's a kiosk, but it's a single moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about service design, we're talking about multiple touch points. We're talking about digital things. We're talking about physical things, intangible, tangible. We're also talking about what connects those things and what mm-hmm. happens in between those moments and in between those touch points. And that to me is really exciting. I think the other thing that distinguishes it is when you're talking about the design of that one touch point, that one product, it's generally about, I don't like the term user, but it's the human who is interacting with it and the thing itself.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about service design, it's about the person who is receiving the service, and it is about everybody behind that service that is responsible for delivering it.
Right. Wow. So that's a lot more encompassing than everything else. I mean, but how does that differentiate from UX?
So
because isn't UX supposedly the full experience?
I think it depends on your definition of UX, and the lines are getting blurred. I
feel like we're doing dictionary.com for designers here.
I think traditionally UX has been about a digital thing. Mm-hmm. or a couple digital things that talk to each other.
Yeah.
And it has not really gone outside of the realm of digital. So service design generally does include an aspect of UX design. And I think a lot of service designers started mm-hmm. in the world of UX and have kind of grown out of that. But this idea that you are talking about organizational change management,
yeah.
you are scripting conversations and interactions that people are having in real time is very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you ask me, that's the big nut that needs to be cracked, because working in these tiny little, almost unrealistic situations, you have to look at the broad picture. Otherwise, yes. You're not going to really understand what the user is trying to do, where they're going, whatever. And is this sort of this is, like you said, this is a fairly new concept as well, service design?
Well, it's newer in the United States.
It's only 20 years old as opposed to 30 years old.
Yes, exactly. So I was very fortunate to get my graduate degree at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And when I started in the graduate program there a little over 10 years ago, they were also starting a service design program. And mm-hmm. It is the first and possibly still the only named service design program in the entire United States.
Fantastic.
Yes. So there's a lot of programs that are teaching service design, but this is, I think, the only one where you graduate with a degree in service design, which is also different than, what's happening in Europe, which is ahead of us. And what I'm also hearing kind of out in the marketplace is my clients are coming to us and describing a problem that is more than a touch point. but they do not have the language yet to describe that they're looking for service design or what that means, or whether even there's someone out there that can do that for them.
Right, right. Well, it's funny how terminology is so key in all these things, because unless you're mapped the term almost exactly, people don't really understand. They think it's something completely different because they're not familiar of the similarities between that and something else. So you could say service design and UX and design thinking, they all have similar roots, but you say, oh, we need this, right? Yes. Which may necessarily encompass these other two things. So they're similar, but
and in some ways it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about people in the private sector who have problems, they just have to be able to roughly describe their problem.
Yeah.
And then we can describe, we can provide them with what a path to a solution looks like.
Yeah, but I mean, no one's going to put on their website, "We solve problems." It's just too generic.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Or do you remember the term solutioning? That used to be like a big deal, solutioning. It's like, well, yeah, what is everyone is solutioning. I mean, we're all trying to, solve problems for our clients. I mean, that's the way it works. So can you tell me a little bit about some of the specific successes and hopefully not failures that you've had through your agency?
Sure. So we have some of the recent successes that we have. We work across verticals, so we've kind of touched every industry that's out there. I think that just being Boston based, we happen to touch a lot of financial services, and we saw a pretty dramatic change with COVID, as everyone did. But pre-COVID, one of the things that I have been pretty frustrated with working with financial services firms, large financial services firms, not more in the startup space, over the last 5 or 10 years, is they're all really just trying to play catch up, and they're trying to get where they should have been 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And there's every excuse and every blocker in the way. And so when they're asking for service design and they're asking for design thinking, we can't actually deliver it to them. Well, now a fire was lit under them, and a lot of the excuses went out the door, and things that I previously saw take 5 years have now been done in a year.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's interesting in where our company is coming into play is less about helping them catch up to speed, and now more allowing them to actually think about the future and think about the direction that they want to go, and think about the future of digital banking, or thinking about the customer relationship in another way, being able to actually compete with what the startups are providing.
Yeah.
And that's been really, really fun. And a lot of it is more about working with them to think differently and approach things differently than actually getting in there and building the things for them, which is
really interesting. Because financial services has always been such a laggard when it comes to these things, and it's not just a regulatory thing. I think they use that as an excuse. Sometimes they go, "Oh, we're stuck because we can't do all these things because we're financial services." But if anything, you guys have the resources to do all sorts of things that no one else can do. And it's just you're right. I mean, we needed a crisis to drive them into thinking about things in new ways, because they're like, well, if it ain't broke, don't break it. It's fine the way it is. We've been surviving, we've been thriving, we've been making a lot of money. But and these startups are like nibbling at us, but we don't see them actually making any kind of dent. And I'm like, are you kidding? You guys are already dead. If they provided a alternative, people would be gone in a second, because who loves their bank, right? I mean,
right. It's a transactional relationship for a reason most of the time.
Exactly.
The whole regulatory excuse, I've now basically started shooting back with, well, Robinhood does it, and Acorn does it, and Betterment does it, and they are regulated the same way you are.
Yeah, exactly right. And the funny thing is that they're so set in their ways, and they think that they're these monoliths that cannot be chipped down. But that's what's happening. I mean, they're getting chipped down, and they think that their competitors can't do anything to them. But they're amassing in strength, and the loyalty is just not there. I mean, why would I go to a full service financial services institution like a Wells Fargo or something like that when I can get a better rate for more mortgage here, a better rate for this here, a better rate for this here, because no one's really interested. They want best of breed in each service. They don't really care about the monolithic. I want to be able to go to into my bank and shake my banker's hand. I can't even do that anymore.
I have a direct quote from a broker that I interviewed that I used with one of my financial services I think it was in every presentation I gave them. And this direct quote was, I'm not going to name the financial institution, but this financial institution by far has the best product, but they are so difficult to do business with. I will not use them ever again.
Wow.
And I think that, one of my favorite books that I keep revisiting again and again and again, which I think I posted to you, is The Experience Economy by Pine and Gilmore. And, it talks about, we moved from commodities into goods. We are now in a service economy, and we are moving into an experience economy, which just bumps it up another notch. Everyone's product is pretty much comparable and the same now.
Yeah.
That's not why someone chooses one company over another.
But some companies, they haven't even gotten to the service point yet,
right?
let alone the experience point.
Yes.
Because I have this, I know financial services are probably the worst offenders here, but it's kind of like the customers here, they want to perform a specific task, right? But the bank is over here, or the other company is over here and going, this is our process. It's like, so you have to come to us. We can't come to you. And I think we need more companies going to the customer and going, how would you like to do this? How would you like to think about this, as opposed to having to do it our way? And I think there's a lot of barriers for these companies to actually think about it from that angle. Have you seen that sort of thing? And how do you break through those kinds of barriers?
Yeah. So I wish we lived in a world where I did not have to spend a large portion of my time trying to convince people of the value and the ROI of talking to their customers. Because I think that I have rarely been in a situation where I have played back, this is what your customers are saying, this is what they need and they want, and I was not believed.
Right.
And it didn't change the way that people were thinking. I think it's just allowing us to get to that step of, I want to say that McKinsey came out with statistics, was it last year, business and design statistics, that 50% of companies are still not talking to their customers, which is just, it blows my mind. I know that's true because I see it every day, but it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
So I think that, for every dollar you spend in taking the time to actually research what your customers need and want, you get that 3 times back in the ROI. And we just need to kind of get better about talking about that value and then showing it. I think that's the other thing. It's a lot of times, especially when you're talking about something like service design, it's not an instantaneous KPI metric. There are things that you can measure pretty quickly, but thinking about this as a long-term investment.
And who thinks long-term anymore? How do you get people to think long-term? I have the same problem. I have Futurist services, and I was like, let's look out 10 years. And they're like, are you kidding? I can't even look out 3 months.
Yeah.
So
a lot of times we're trying to divide up. So, especially coming out of like a discovery engagement. And a lot of times what we've tried to do, we're kind of doing this more and more in my consultancy, is we'll kind of phase out work, right? Because when somebody, exactly what we were just talking about, somebody comes to us with what they think is the problem. Do we know that that's really the problem? How confident are they? And do we know what we need to build to solve that problem? So, how do you, especially with service design, how do you scope out a year's worth of work? It's really hard. So we'll start and say, all right, we're going to do a 3-month discovery engagement. And at the end of that 3 months, we're going to have a list of pain points and opportunities that you can address. And a lot of times we go through a prioritization exercise and we kind of say, all right, this is the low-hanging fruit that, you will see impact, whether that's big or small, but you will see impact within the next 6 months to a year. This is your medium term, and then this is your long term. And you have to think about, like, if you really want to, move the needle, you have to be thinking, let's say even 2 to 3 years out. Forget about 5 years, but even just thinking 2 to 3 years out.
So is that like people come to you because people come to you saying, oh, I need a website, or I need an app, or I need this, or I need that. So they need this concrete thing created. And then you talk to them and you realize, wait a minute, this is not what you need. Or you're jumping ahead to this thing, which is not necessarily where you should start, right? You should start a few steps back and go, wait, maybe it's not an app. Maybe it's not a thing. Maybe it's, and then is that where you come back to them and go, you got to think about this a little more deeply?
Yeah, so I have a project that we're doing right now. This is exactly what happened. So they are a government laboratory who is invested in technology transfer, and they originally came to us because they are having a hard time with kind of finding people to license and the whole licensing experience.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, there's a couple different ways that we can solve this, but we did a 3-month discovery, and we came out and we said, yeah, that process is not working right, but you have a bigger problem. You don't have enough patents in the pipeline. You don't have enough engagement. You don't have enough researchers who are raising their hand and saying, I have an invention. We need to stop and think about this. And so when we went out of discovery into the second phase of work, we completely shifted where we are focusing.
Right.
So now it's about changing it's a completely different internal process. It's different roles and responsibilities. It's a different database and infrastructure. It's different communications. It's a different value proposition. Then once you establish that, then we can switch back to that external piece.
That's interesting. But they reached out to you because they figured you were going to build a final thing, and then you realized that's not the final thing that they needed.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Very cool.
And they were very receptive to us changing gears.
That's good. But so is that the success story you're talking about? Or you were gonna tell us about
that's definitely one of our recent success stories. I think we are. It's a very, very collaborative project, and I think with service design you absolutely need that. So we're working hand in hand with them, and we are actually able to recommend and make real changes. I think the other thing is for lots of different reasons, sometimes especially when you're talking about changing large processes that touch lots of people, and talking about changing roles and responsibilities and adding new roles and responsibilities, there's a lot of blockers to that. In this particular
people hate change.
People
in general.
hate change, right? This particular, and again, they're a government agency. They have been very, very receptive, and very collaborative, and it's been a wonderful experience. And they're so excited about where they're heading and the outcome, which gets us excited.
I love it. It's funny you should mention that, because I always thought the governments were a lot more restricted in what they could do. And I was interviewing somebody from the city of San Jose, and it sounded like she had more leeway than your typical organization or business that I'd be talking to. So I just thought it was interesting that there seems to be this flip-flop. Suddenly the public sector is more innovative than the private sector.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's not at all what I expected.
I would never think that. But I guess you think about it, it's kind of like the profit motive sometimes gets in the way of innovation, right? Because it's kind of like, do you want to do what's best for your customers, or do you want to do what's best for your shareholders, right? And a lot of times those things are not the same thing.
And it's always a risk. It's always a gamble.
Yeah, exactly. So are there any failures you'd like to talk about? Like something that didn't quite go well?
Yes.
You don't have to use any names or.
Yes. So this one was a couple years ago. I mean, there's always failures.
Distant past, different company. Past. No,
it was, yes. And it was another large financial services company. And we were actually hired for a large service design project. And there was a lot of UX design involved in it as well. But they had a very large portion of their business. They called it an investment product. It was really an investment service. And I spent 18 months, and we did everything. We did, we got all sorts of what we thought was buy-in from the business. We did design thinking workshops. We did all sorts of research. We came up with new personas and journey maps and new service blueprints and future stating services. And we had storyboards of what the promised land would look like.
Wow.
And we had a whole manual that we created that we sent to them and said, this is how you turn this around, and this is going to give the customers what they said they want, and this is where you're going to see different, like, complete market differentiation from anybody who's out there. And it was very close to the end of the project that we found out that the person who had hired us, who was our main point of contact, did not have any power in the organization.
Oh no.
And what basically ended up going to market was a new website, a video, and a print brochure.
Oh no. You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
Oh man. So it's not even, I guess it's not even something you could proudly point to and say, we did that, right?
No. Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yes.
That's terrible. So what would you have done in retrospect to is there any way you could have not could have happened, or is like you found out too late?
Yeah, I think there's some, you don't know what you don't know. But I think that, one of the things that we have found, another difference between kind of a product design or a UX design engagement or a service design engagement, is you have to be brought in at a different level of the business to be successful in those. Right. If we're really talking about high level organizational change and service design, it has to be, SVP, EVP, C-suite, somebody that's really helping drive. There might not be the day-to-day person, but they have to be kind of the owner, the point person, the ultimate decision maker. They have to be bought in, right, in order to make the changes that you need. Yeah.
And it's the same with innovation, really, and all these all these other spaces. But it's interesting that it's kind of like begs the question: where do you see like really good service design out there, so I could point to it and go, "Look at that! That is the gold standard."
Yeah. So everybody laughs at me. I am originally from upstate New York, and I am part of the cult of Wegmans. Are you familiar?
Oh yeah, I know Wegmans. I used to live in Toronto. I know Wegmans.
Wegmans to me was like mastering service design before I knew what service design was. I think that when you think about them, they think about the entire sensory experience of you going through a grocery store, and they look and feel different than all of their competitors, right? The fact that you walk into the produce section is by design, and they want you to come to all of this color and this life and this livelihood and this smell, and they think about the lighting, and they think about the carts, and they think about the pathways to the store, and then they kind of do things like, I went to a Wegmans on Thanksgiving morning one day, and they had random employees scattered throughout the store just there to direct you to what you needed. And they had a police officer who's directing traffic in and out of the parking lot, right? Like, just like,
I love it.
Like that. I think that their app is top notch. You choose the specific store, and it organizes your grocery list by aisle of the store.
Oh, I love it.
Like,
that is the way to do retail, I gotta say.
Right. I think the other thing too is they are a company that really, really invests in their employees. They have grown a lot over the last couple of years, but they are very, very mindful about what markets they're going in and not growing too fast, because they take, I think, 2 to 3 times as long to open a store over their competitors, because they are so invested in training their people and making sure that everybody gets the Wegmans experience.
Wow.
They are consistently one of the top 10 companies to work for on Forbes, because again, they take care of their customers. They have great benefits. They have scholarship programs, everything. And when you have happy employees, you have a better service.
Oh, that's fantastic. I haven't been to a Wegmans in a long, long time, but that is fantastic. That is absolutely the way to do it. And I mean, why isn't anybody doing that? Is it because it's just too time expensive and too labor expensive and too money expensive? Or is it just that, they haven't made that decision? I mean, what Wegmans, obviously, I think they reap the benefits in customers, right?
Yes.
Whereas if any other retailer or any other business for that matter use the same techniques, they would probably reap the benefits there as well.
Yeah, I mean, they are a company that has one of the highest levels of brand loyalty that I've ever seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm in the cult of Wegmans. It does feel cult-like sometimes. But I think that, they have figured out that there is a significant ROI to their investment.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of their competitors are just about, transaction and scale. And there is a market for that, but it's a very different experience. I hate grocery shopping and I love going to Wegmans.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. That's great. So do you ever point your customers to Wegmans and go, see, this is the gold standard in service design?
Yes.
Oh, very cool.
I talk about them quite a bit. They just came to Boston, the Boston area, a couple of years ago. So now I can actually have people go and check them out.
Wow, fantastic. Well, next time I'm out on the East Coast, because they're not anywhere out here. They're just on the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
As far as I know. Yeah. That's too bad. I remember going to Wegmans when I was there, and I did remember it being a different experience. So
yes, it is.
Steal those ideas. I love it. So it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 2031. Okay. 10 years from now, what's the world going to be like?
Oh, what's the world?
What's the world going to be like? What is your company going to be like? What are you going to be doing in 10 years? I mean, will we have, AI retailers like robots telling us what to do, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as the years go on, I'm going to be designing less and less for screens, which I think is going to be interesting. I'm hoping that there's a more idea of frictionless, that I like the world intuits more and anticipates my needs more, which would be wonderful, but not in like a creepy, I'm spying on you marketing way. I'm going to push you things, just like observing my behavior and being able to help me make the most of my time.
Yeah.
I am hoping that service design becomes as prolific as design thinking is today, which would be wonderful. I'm hoping that I don't have to convince people to invest in customer research or design research, which is also, I think that I'm hoping that we see more designers and strategists in the C-suite of companies and leading. We've mentioned innovation. I had a friend reach out to me a couple weeks ago who asked me, he's like, so I have this weird situation where I'm in a position where I have to convince people to put a designer on the innovation team.
You're kidding me.
Okay.
Wow. That sounds like a no-brainer to me. And you actually have to convince people? Oh my God.
Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm not sure I can help you because I've never heard of anyone needing, so I think, I'm hoping that our innovation has become a loaded term and misunderstood. I hope that we think about it in the way that it's meant to be thought about moving forward. And not everything has to be innovation. And it shouldn't be innovation, but I hope that we are able to make more space for it and it becomes more routine. Yeah,
exactly. But I think that's whole sort of connecting with your customers is kind of like Clayton Christensen's last book. He was talking about jobs to be done theory, right? And the whole point of that is that your customer has something that they have a job to be done. And the problem is that their job to be done, corporations usually, or companies usually ignore that. They have, our job to be done is to make money. Your job to be done is to, I don't know, buy a milkshake in the morning or whatever. And if those things aren't connected, then the sale won't be made, or the sale will be made imperfectly, and the customer will be unsatisfied. So I think we need to get to that point where, like you said, if you think about it, all these systems around us are collecting all this data on us. They know so much about us, but they make such poor decisions on what to put in front of us. So, I mean, if you've been on your Facebook feed lately and it's like, oh my God, what is this? Right?
Yes.
But I'm hoping that we're going to get to the point where it's a lot more intelligent and it knows exactly when to bring the right thing in front of us at the right moment. And make those decisions, especially in the whole sales cycle of things, because, we have demands. We know what we want. And if it could just be a better match to the thing that we're looking for, then I think we're further along the pipe. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's I frequently use with my clients the desirable, viable, feasible Venn diagram. Are you familiar with that?
Yep.
And I'm hoping we're moving in a direction where we don't have to say you need to be at the intersection of desirable, viable, feasible. There's just more companies that's ingrained in their DNA.
Yeah.
Because I often say, if you're just in the feasible and viable, that's Facebook, that's Comcast, that's most airlines. You don't want to be them.
Yeah. Exactly right. Very cool. So thank you so much. This has been great. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Sure. So I am the only Krista Siniscarco on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. You can also find me through my company, Cantina. Our website is cantina.co, cantina.co.
That's a great name. Did you get that out of a Star Wars or what?
They got it from I
keep thinking about the Cantina scene, with the aliens playing saxophones.
we do play that song quite a bit at our company gatherings, but yes.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you.
Talk to you again.
Bye. Thank you.